good afternoon or good morning, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thanks for joining this LinkedIn Live. Hopefully it will be a interesting session, normally about 30 minutes, depending on the interaction that we have with the audience. So we'll get into the content in a minute. What I first would like to do is just ask you if you could let me know maybe in the chat, in the comment section, let me know where you're listening in from or watching in from. It sometimes helps us to maybe make some relevant comments about the conversation as it relates to locations. Also good just to know that some people are out there actually listening to this. So if you could just let me know where you're watching this from or listening to this from, that would be really helpful. And I would encourage you to ask any questions throughout the session. David and I will take these questions as we go. We want to make it as interactive as possible and as conversational as possible. This isn't a webinar, it's a LinkedIn Live, so we want to make sure it's as interactive as possible. So we'll quickly do a bit of introduction. So first of all, I'm David Rickard. I'm a partner here at Everest Group. I lead all of our research on customer experience management, which includes customer experience technologies, operations. We also look at the demands from an enterprise perspective. I also lead our work on trust and safety and content moderation, as well as marketing services. I've been with Everest Group about 3 years. I've also been in consulting for a few years, but I was also on the buyer side, which makes me probably a little bit unique from a typical analyst. Spent 17 years at Microsoft, led the outsourcing for the consumer business, which was about 16,000 agents a year. So I've got a buyer perspective that I always try and weave into these conversations. I'll introduce or get the other David to introduce himself. The good thing about having two Davids on the call, I guess, is that when you go off of this call and say that David was brilliant, we can both think one of it was us. We won't know which one it was, but we can at least think that one of us has done a good job on this call. So, David, over to you. It'd be great to get a quick introduction of yourself.
Sure. Well, good afternoon or good morning to everyone that's taken the time to join. I'm David Eilert. I work for an organisation called Davies Consulting. I've been a consultant most of my career. I've worked for some of the big four, Accenture's, Price Waterhouse, but I've also worked on the client side as well. So I've worked for organisations like Bupa, Gillette before it became Procter & Gamble, and also for British Telecom. So a lot of my work has stemmed from kind of the first generation of telephone contacts, which were the traditional call centres, and I've stayed in that domain all the way through contact centres, CRM, and now obviously the most recent wave, digital transformation, multi-channel, moving into omni-channel. And of course, hot topic and what we're going to cover today is artificial intelligence and how organisations can actually get moving in this space and understand, some of the considerations before they embark, if they haven't already, or some of the things they should be considering if they've already started that journey. So that's a little bit about myself, and obviously delighted to be here and to share some of the insights.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. Yeah, and this is such a hot topic. And thank you for those who've already put comments in the chat. We've got people in from Mumbai, from the UK, and from Ohio in the USA. So a nice global audience already. But I would ask anyone else if you could just put a comment in the chat. Hopefully there's more than 3 people out there. But if there's not, then the 3 are very welcome. So thank you for listening to us. So, yeah, the reason that we did this session was because we're covering a lot. If you've ever looked at anything that we do here at Everest Group, we do a lot on generative AI. It's obviously the hot topic with our audience. But one of the things that we also talk about is, well, it's just, yes, it can do some great stuff, but actually there's a real underpinning requirement that data is fundamental to making this a success. And when I do LinkedIn Lives, I really like to get people who are actually out there at the sharp end. I could have brought some of my team in, and we've got a great analyst perspective and research perspective on this. But I know David, and I know the Davies Group really well, and actually wanted to get someone who's actually doing some of these implementations or working with clients on implementations, so we actually get a sense of what's happening in the real world as well. So I think our audience do appreciate that. So that's really why we're doing it. So let me just set the scene. If we bring the first slide up, please. What we're seeing is actually that when we did our key issue study, which again, those familiar with Everest Group content, we do a key issue study at the end of every year, and we ask hundreds of enterprises what's going to be some of your biggest challenges that you're facing and what some of the biggest areas you're going to be investing on moving forward. What you can see from this slide is that if we looked at the 2024 answer, advanced automation, including generative AI, is the #1 area of investments from a CXM perspective that people are going to be making investments into. You can then see it's UX and CX, and then it's cloud platforms. Cybersecurity is obviously fundamental, and advanced analytic solutions is at number 5. So really interesting that actually some advanced automation, including generative AI, is the number 1 priority. So, David, I would just say, I mean, are you seeing that resonate in the market? Is that you've seen an uptick maybe in ask from your customers or the prospects that you're pursuing? Are you seeing interest in this area? Is it being borne out in our research?
I think absolutely. I mean, the marketplace, as probably everyone's aware, is swarmed with noise from analysts and product vendors, selling the virtues of the benefits of what AI can deliver, and that started to translate now into C-level suite within organizations. There's lots of research that people can find and discover very, very easily. I mean, I always like to quote the speed at which ChatGPT moved through the marketplace. I think it reached 1 million users within about 5 days and 100 million within 2 months. So the pace of this technology is phenomenal, and there is a familiarity with AI and generative AI, already in the marketplace, which makes it quite welcome. And obviously, people need to manage the risks. But certainly the trends are there. We know that the market size by the end of this year alone, globally, is going to be something like 184 billion investment, and that's going to grow by 2030 to about 850 billion. So lots of money is going to be injected into this space, and we expect it to have an impact as well, on processes, the roles that people play within the business, the data side of the operations, and how important that's going to be to actually deliver some real value. But we don't expect, AI to replace jobs across the board. We expect it to change jobs and potentially, substitute some jobs, but also create some new jobs. So plenty of opportunity, I think, for board members. And I think it really is one of those hot topics when you actually talk to C-level. You talk to the CIO, the Chief Customer Officer, the CISO, all of them are aware that AI is just around the corner if it hasn't already been addressed. And they're looking at ways they can actually, maximize, return from this, very smart and, very rapidly changing technology space.
Yeah, it's funny actually. So I was with someone last week when I was traveling, and someone made a comment which is it's actually made it quite difficult with ChatGPT making sort of, if you like, consumer awareness. So it's not a technology that only enterprises knew about, but everyone knew about ChatGPT. They made a comment which is their CEO was just like, well, surely we can just roll it out and it's $20 or put like $20 an instance or whatever, and everyone can have it, and then that's how it's going to work. And I think that the proliferation of it and the awareness of it, even in consumer level organizations or consumers on the street, people who wouldn't normally follow technology, it's just people did think, oh, well, it's just going to be everywhere and it's going to replace jobs. And I think we're very much here at Everest Group the same as you in terms of we don't predict that we're going to not need contact center agents. I think we are definitely going to need, for a long time moving forward, a lot of contact center agents still. They're going to be supported and improved and assisted and helped to be more efficient and effective through AI, but actually a vast majority of them are not going to be replaced. I often like to mention 70% of revenues generated within the CX outsource space is still through the voice channel. That's not going away anytime soon. So, but actually, if you could help the agent be more efficient and more effective, it will drive down costs. And yeah, some of the type of interactions that don't need to be handled by a human, or those who don't want to speak to a human, they can be automated or eliminated, but humans in the loop are still going to be fundamental moving forward. So, I think it's good that we're aligned on that. We didn't even rehearse that bit, but it's good that we're aligned. I would just say to the audience, if you've got any questions as we talk about this, just let me know. But maybe if we bring up the second slide, it's only 4 slides, so don't worry, you're not going to be bored with death by PowerPoint here. But we've done some research where we were starting to look at, okay, how ready are you for deploying generative AI? And this survey was specifically for generative AI, and we know that AI has been around forever, but a lot of the hype was around Gen AI. But we started to ask organizations, okay, how ready are you for, in terms of things such as technology readiness, and then your data readiness, your people readiness. And what you can see there is quite bullish numbers, that 59% of organizations saying that they are ready from a technology perspective. but really relevant to this conversation is around sort of the data readiness. And 63% are saying that they're ready from a data perspective, which I think personally I probably feel is a bit optimistic in terms of are people really ready, or have they really understood the complexity of the data? But again, David, what's your view on this? Do you echo those sentiments? Would you have the same skepticism that I have?
Yeah, I think wholeheartedly. I always think of that financial services quote when you look at investment history, but I think in this case, history is often a fairly good predictor for the future when it comes to technology. I mean, if you look at organizations' recent attempts over the kind of last 10 years to exploit and deploy things like business intelligence and knowledge management, many of those initiatives have actually failed. And it's because of data, the lack of availability of data being of a poor quality, not really having the right governance processes in to manage that data within the organization. And quite often it's the poor change management around how these capabilities have been implemented. I think AI is going to fit exactly in that same space. It's going to have those exact same challenges, across the data sphere. I mean, obviously AI algorithms require large volumes of data, large processing capacity. And I'm not sure organizations have fully grasped just how big a requirement that's going to be if they're going to roll it out full scale across their operations. So I think organizations might be trialing things in a small way at the moment, but they probably don't fully understand some of the ongoing challenges, around maintaining these algorithms and, having real live data supporting it from a continuous improvement perspective, and the amount of processing capacity that's going to be needed from the computers. I mean, it's a little bit like Bitcoin that does all of the mining. I don't think anybody ever realized just how much computer processing power was going to be needed. And I think AI, if it's going to take off, in the way that we expect it to over the next couple of years, it's going to be requiring that processing capacity as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, David. Yeah, and they say the number being so high is, are people fooling themselves? Are they just trying to portray a positive picture, or is there a lack of understanding? And maybe it's a combination of all three as to why people are so confident in the number being where it's at.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few other reasons as well, specifics. I think probably there's a low data maturity within organizations that they're not fully aware of. Sometimes the data management capabilities aren't well defined and well understood within organizations. Looking at the overall architecture, they're not necessarily clear on what AI needs from a data perspective, the sheer volume of data, the velocity of that data, the range and variety of the data, and the level of accuracy that's needed. So there's, lots of challenges. And I think organizations, and we're starting to see it a little bit more with some of our clients where we're working on large transformation programs, in the CRM space, in the CCaaS space, they're starting to look at different architectural roles. And one of the ones that's starting to come to the surface more and more is, a critical role around data architecture. And we've been helping our clients actually define what those roles are on those transformation programs, and in some instances helping to fulfill some of the gaps that clients have. So data architecture is going to be something that's going to become more and more prevalent, I think, to ensure the overall success of AI.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting. So we've got a couple of slides that we've produced recently. We start looking at the different roles that are going to be needed in the contact center when you start thinking about the use of generative AI, and a number of roles that, I mean, the transformation of agents, you might need less agents, but they're going to be doing different jobs. And then when you start looking at from an IT perspective and a data management and a data governance perspective, it's also a completely different set of roles. So it's quite interesting. And when we speak to a lot of the industry bodies in places like the Philippines or South Africa, they're obviously also very keen about what roles are going to be needed in the future to be able to prepare the people that they've got. I just want to take a couple of questions that we've had from the audience. So Michael Tucker's asked, what's the sample size of and the sample, the methodology of the surveys? What I would say is there's a couple of surveys I mentioned in this discussion. So if it's our key issue study, then it's about 600 different enterprises, and we reach out to our network of clients, but also through industry networks and through our LinkedIn followers and connections. And then if we're talking about the enterprise study that I often reference, which was specific to CX, that was 200 enterprises who are using CX services, and that was an interview-based survey. So we have a mixed methodology depending on what survey we're talking about, but relatively big samples for this type of questions. But we're trying to speak to specifically on any of our CX surveys is people who are leading CX functions and trying to understand from them the challenges that they're facing. So that's the area that we look at. So fairly robust sample sizes, at least a couple of hundred people in any of the surveys we're mentioning. To answer the question from Prashant, so Prashant has asked, can you share some insights on Gen AI adoption for CXM? What are the use cases, challenges, and proliferation by industry vertical? We will get onto some of the challenges towards the end of this session. What I would say is when we look at the use cases, we're definitely seeing, and David, be interesting to get your perspective on where you're seeing it in the industry. But from our perspective, we look at the use cases, most of them that have gone to production are things like agent assistance, so improving knowledge management. It can be in after call work and summarization. It's also being used quite a lot in agent training as well. But sort of those are probably the sort of some of the key areas. So agent assist, giving the agents next best actions, call summarization, trying to improve the efficiency of the agent through the knowledge management, improving the efficiency to improve FCR, and also to reduce AHT. So that's where we're seeing a lot of the main use cases. In terms of proliferation, actually, if you've come back to us in a few weeks, we'll definitely have a better sense. What we're doing right now, actually, is a piece of research looking at where are the pilots and where have they moved into production? Because what we hear loud and clear from the industry is stop telling us what it could do and start telling us what it is actually doing. And so we know there's a lot of pilots. There's probably millions of CX related pilots out there, but actually how many have moved from pilot into production? And we're actually currently collating that data right now. So watch this space. There will be more and more information coming soon on that. But David, in terms of your experience, in terms of use cases, are you seeing those sort of use cases being the main areas as well? So more around agent assist versus really putting them directly in front of the customer?
Yeah, I think similar to yourself, we're starting to see more organizations looking at things like auto call summarization, saving obviously the agent's time as they summarize the calls. It's particularly relevant if you've got high volumes, which most of the B2C contact centers do have. We're seeing it supporting conversational analytics, using natural language processing, to analyze the data, to draw out insights, and that's relevant across, a number of channels, not just voice. That can be supporting, chats and things like that as well. Particularly in banking and insurance, we're starting to see it being much more relevant for fraud detection, spotting patterns in transactions, spotting language that people are using if they're interacting with the contact center. Another one that's starting to come more to the surface is queue management optimization. So helping to predict volumes and dynamically adjusting staffing levels to queues for call centers and contact centers. So yeah, I think it's predominantly around helping the productivity of the agents, but it's also helping run some of the behind the scenes activities, like workforce management as well.
Yeah, brilliant. No, that's great, though, because I think, again, it's good that this is aligned, and so we didn't rehearse this bit, but it's good that we're seeing the same stuff, because we often get the questions about, well, how much is actually replacing an agent speaking to a customer or interacting with a customer? And again, we're not seeing that impact happen now. We are expecting it will happen over time as confidence comes, and when we get into the challenges in a moment, then obviously there's challenges around security and privacy and the concerns around hallucinations and all those things that have to be overcome. But actually, I think it's a safer space to start doing it to support an agent and do some of the behind the scenes tasks, but can still leverage or deliver massive benefits when you're driving efficiency, especially if you've got high volumes, as you said.
And I think there will be some industry specific use cases that will obviously grow, as the technology matures. But at the moment, we're starting to look at those that are probably most relevant cross industry, where everyone can adopt them. And I think that's the examples that we've kind of given.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting, actually. One of the things that we've been talking to a lot of enterprises about, and also service providers, is starting to think about, okay, what's the business problem you're trying to solve with technology? A lot of the time, you and I have been in the industry a long time, and a lot of time that you've got technology and you're looking for a problem to solve with it. And that's not being disrespectful to people in technology, but that's just the nature of we've got this technology, what can we do with it? But actually, we're trying to say, actually think about what the business problem is, because AI and Gen AI might not be the solution for every problem, but there may be other solutions out there that can solve the business problem. So I don't think we're saying either that Gen AI is always the answer. There may be other solutions that are better and cheaper and faster to deploy. It's about finding the business problem, then finding the best solution for that in the long term. So another question we had, which is asking around the concerns that people have around finding people who can work with AI. And where the question was really around, where are people getting trained to work with this stuff? So again, David, I guess you're recruiting consultants and people to work in this stuff on a day-to-day basis. There's some, I guess, legacy knowledge that people have, and AI's been around a long time, so there'll be some people. But do you see where are people going to get these skills?
I think a lot of them are coming from organizations that have actually been developing these types of solutions. So we often look at, the vendor landscape, the people that have actually been on the engineering side. Some of it comes from R&D capabilities within academia, because often, the algorithms and the learnings and the testing are done within academic domains. And there are organizations that are always pioneers, they're pushing the boundaries early, and they create the skills, within certain industries, and those are often a rich vein. But I think we're at a point where we're going to have to train our own resources, supplemented by some, external knowledge, to get to the scale and the capacity that AI is going to need. And there are going to be some brand new roles that still need to be defined. Reasonable and safe use of AI. There's probably going to be new compliance and risk roles that will sit under chief risk officers. So there's going to be, a number of new capabilities and skill sets that are going to need to be defined and built, and then obviously, training people to execute those jobs as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, and just to add to that, I think that's where we also links into the work that we do here at Everest Group, working with a lot of the industry bodies in different countries. As I was saying, they are very keen to understand what skills are going to be needed for the future, and then how do they build those skills into schools and colleges, and also getting the industry thinking about building those skills. So they've got that ecosystem coming through. So I think that's also, we need to start now for what we might need in 3 to 5 years time. But I'm no Nostradamus, but I wouldn't have been able to predict this in 3 years ago, where we're going to be with Gen AI. If I had, I probably would have invested heavily and be very rich, but I'm not. So I think there is hard to know where we're going to need in 3 to 5 years time, but definitely the use of data is going to be a fundamental skill that actually we need to be ready for moving forward.
Sorry, just one more point. I was going to say, don't forget that a lot of the core skills that, our IT teams, our risk teams already have are highly relevant. It's a new application of automation that we're looking at here. So we're not starting with a blank canvas. We are looking at people that have data architecture skills, operating model skills, testing skills. It's just thinking about how those skills are going to be manipulated a little bit to meet the needs of AI.
Yeah, no, that's good point as well. Yeah, we don't want to throw away the skills that we've built up over the last 30, 40 years. There's some people out there with great skills, might be just adapting them or using them in a different way. So, no, good point. This last question, and I'll go back to the content, but I think it's really good in the LinkedIn Live to take questions, because that's what people care about, really. But this is definitely coming your way, David, just as a heads up, which is around the data challenges, any specifics for the insurance or reinsurance industry. So obviously, I know Davies Consulting and Davies Group are very close to the insurance space, but anything in terms of insurance, we tend not to get too industry or vertically focused. But I think this one was obviously relevant from your experience. But do you see data challenges in any particular vertical? Obviously, every vertical has its own challenges, but do you see anything specific in the insurance space?
I'm not an insurance person by background, so I can't give you, specifics on insurance. I think the data challenges, are around some of the points that we've mentioned. It's understanding the sphere of associated data for the use cases that organizations, are trying to implement. That's one of the biggest challenges. And obviously, data is fairly unstructured in many organizations, and there's duplication of data in many organizations. So it's about having that overall data governance and data architecture in place. And that's one of the things that, organizations are starting to adapt and move towards, much more rapidly than they have previously. But you've got new technologies, that have been around for the last sort of few years, the data lakes, and those types of capabilities are becoming, more relevant to understanding the data that exists across an enterprise.
Yeah. And I guess and from my experience when I was consulting, I guess one of the things I would say from an insurance perspective, having worked on a few insurance projects, would be there's a lot of legacy technology within the insurance space. And I know organizations are working hard to move away from that or update it or be able to connect the systems. But whenever you've got any legacy systems, there's always a risk that there's isolated data or islands of data, shall we say, that actually don't necessarily connect as well as they could do with your existing infrastructure. So that may be another challenge that's specific to an area like insurance. But if we just move back to the content, if we move on to the next slide that we were just going to show, this is a specific part of the survey that we did, was actually asking CX leaders, are you ready for Gen AI? So the survey I showed earlier was more enterprise wide. When we look at CX leaders, and these are people leading CX functions, then they're similar numbers. So 52% believe they've got adequate computing power, 50% believe they've got the ability to scale, 69% said they have cloud-based infrastructure capacity. But when you talk about data readiness, say the middle box there, the grey box, said that sufficient availability of high quality training data for Gen AI solutions is a major roadblock to many enterprises. So, David, we talked about data and the need for governance in terms of using the data for training. Is that again something that you run into as a problem, or something that you would expect to see as you start to look at rolling out these type of solutions?
I think the biggest challenge is around accessing, the data that an enterprise has, because as you quite rightly suggested, it's scattered across a whole range of operational systems. Some might be more modern systems, CRM systems, but there's normally a wealth of legacy applications, claims processing systems, finance systems, product databases. I mean, it's getting that total integrated view to really maximize the benefits. So I think that's the biggest challenge at the moment, is understanding your data estate and where your data sits, and then doing the data cleaning and understanding, as I mentioned, the spheres of data that are going to be needed. So what data are you encapsulating for each of your use cases?
Yeah, no, that's good, and I think we've captured it. But so where we're going to move on to next is to really just summarize some of the key challenges, and I think we've captured it within the questions. But I don't know, David, if you could just maybe summarize, just bring together everything that we've talked about over the last 25 minutes. So when we say about launching or developing and having Gen AI solutions out there in the CXM environment, what are some of the biggest challenges you're seeing? Again, I know we've sort of covered it, but it'd be good maybe just one line summary of each of the key challenges that you're seeing.
I mean, we tend to work with our clients really from a business perspective. As I say, the technology is often looking for a use case, and one of the biggest challenges is getting clients to actually stop and think and say, well, what is it we're going to be investing in, and what benefits and what problems are we trying to fix? So I think it's being, obviously, like many change initiatives, it's being business led and understanding the business drivers that you're going to actually look to try and pull, and that goes across all the traditional drivers that we normally look at. How can you support growth through new sales, upselling and cross-selling? How can you reduce the costs? Again, that's where most people think AI is going to add most value, removing the process bottlenecks, other process inefficiencies, looking at maximizing automation opportunities. So those are some of the key areas. Challenges around risk and compliance. We know new regulations, are coming to the fore, on a pretty much a quarterly basis from, governments and regulatory bodies. So organizations have got to adapt to those requirements and make sure that they've got processes in place and the right KPIs in place to be able to measure the effectiveness of what they're actually doing.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And if we bring up the last slide, I think, which is what we've got, which actually you started to sort of address as well, when we think about, okay, what are some of the hurdles? So this was again through some of our survey analysis that we've done in terms of asking enterprises, what's the barrier for you to adopt Gen AI across your CXM space, or more broadly across the enterprise? And data security and privacy was by far the number one issue, closely followed though by compliance issues. Then you've got accuracy, then cost, and then lack of expertise. Data wasn't even called out in here specifically. I mean, that's a whole different issue. But I think the data readiness part, data security and privacy was definitely there. But again, I think you covered them, David. But anything of these that surprises you, or anything else from your experience that you feel is missing, that people are saying to you as a hurdle, that you would be calling out that's not showcased here?
I mean, for me, I think the common sort of pitfalls that people need to address is, you've got to focus on a data strategy. You've got to understand how you're going to govern your data, and you've got to understand the needs of how you're going to use AI. That goes without saying, but it's almost a foundation block. If you haven't got that data layer in place, you're not going to succeed with this. You've got to have very clear sort of guiding principles for how you're going to actually think about deploying AI across the enterprise. The one thing we are seeing with lots of clients is they've actually gone for lots of point solutions, or they're running prototypes and they're running small pilots, but they haven't actually thought about how they can actually deploy a whole range of different use cases in a coherent way across the enterprise. So those guiding principles, we always say are very, important and almost critical to the success of an AI-led strategy. I think having the right stakeholders is another thing. You've got to range from your business owners, the people that, experience the problems that AI is going to fix. You're going to need your data engineers, you're going to need your infosec people, and you're going to need, your supporting application and IT people. And they really become your AI squad for each of your use cases. So it's a slightly different way of working as you start to think about deploying, but it is important that you build that AI squad with the full coverage of resource that you're going to need. And just one other point, because it came to my attention. I was just chatting to somebody the other day, one of my clients, and he said ESG, is so important to us, and we're looking at sustainability, and we know, there's computational costs because of the processing power. So people are starting to think about how they can actually have a positive impact through AI on sustainability. And they're looking at things like renewable energy sources, and they're going to be asking their vendors and their suppliers to actually comply with their own internal ESG strategy and metrics. So, again, something people don't often think about, but, this is going to have, an impact on some of the sustainability measures and targets that organizations are setting.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I was at a session last month, actually, and there was a lot of talk about that, which is everyone's getting excited about Gen AI, but then also you think about carbon neutral, and then so how do you balance those things off, and how much do you invest, and where does that all happen? And yet that's where you have to start looking at this thing at an enterprise level and be more strategic versus having all of these point solutions. And there's been a couple of other questions before this one I'm going to answer. We will get back to the other ones, but one somebody asked around, is there a gap between IT initiatives and CX business needs, which really picks up on your point around sort of obviously building the squad, so making sure that you've got a cohesive, agile team that actually takes a perspective from each part of the business. But actually, I was asked a question last night. I was at a dinner last night, and I got asked a question: who leads this? Is it IT and is it CX? And my answer was a dreadful analyst answer, which was it depends. Because actually we're seeing these initiatives being led by the CX function, who are seeing it as a business problem they want to solve. We are sometimes seeing it being led by IT, who are saying, we have this technology and we can help you. So I don't think there is one answer to this. I think it's different by organization. It's different by where the budget sits, what type of business problem they think they're solving with the technology. So again, horrible analyst answer, but I think it will depending on the situation. But I don't know what your view is, David, in the world that you're in. Do you see IT driving a lot of these? Do you see CX driving a lot of these? Is there a conflict?
I think we're seeing joint teams. I think that's certainly one thing that's becoming more prevalent. And, those teams are made up of a mix of, different skills and functions within an organization. I mean, just looking internally at the Davies Group, just to give a real example, a lot of what we're doing around AI and investigating AI is heavily influenced by our cybersecurity and SecOps, just because of the risks it poses, because of the bad actors that are out there, and how they try and break into the organization through new channels and new ways of working. But for me, I'd always say this to clients: you need to understand what you're trying to address, and that always has to be a business problem. So I'd always expect the top table to be led by somebody within the CX organization that understands how their operation works, understands the pain points, and can see how the technology, through working with the likes of IT and solution providers, etc., can start to define what the changes look like and what the benefits could be. So it can vary, but I'd always say most of the time, 90% of the time, it should be led ideally by the business community.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think I totally agree. And say, having been on the business side and been on the consulting side, I think if you drive it from the business perspective and you can get everyone on board, then actually you come out with a much better solution. So I think I'm totally aligned there.
I think, that's the other thing. You get the ownership because the business are behind the change.
Versus it being something that's been foisted upon them because it's someone else who's got a good idea. I want to just sort of say we're going to try and wrap this up in the next 5 minutes or so. So if you've got any final questions, please get them in. I would also say that here at Everest Group, as you may have seen just from the 3 or 4 slides that we've shown, we do a lot of research into the Gen AI and more broadly CX tech space. And what we are offering, if you are an enterprise buyer out there and you're interested in learning a bit more about what we're seeing, then we are going to offer a complimentary 30-minute discussion on what we're seeing around Gen AI. So there will be a link in the comment section where you can actually press on that, and then you can get access to me or the team in terms of understanding what we're seeing from a research perspective. So that's a free offer for those people who've had to endure listening to me for 37 minutes. So that's going to be out there if you wanted to talk a bit more, and we'll bring a lot of data to that. But just going back to the questions, one of the questions we also had quite early on was really asking the question about with Gen AI and things like Copilot, then asking the right question is going to be key to improving productivity and responsiveness. And are we seeing training really trying to help solve asking the right questions? I think from my perspective, we are definitely seeing that training is being augmented by AI to give agents a chance to be able to understand what questions are people asking, then really using AI to look at, well, what are agents answering these questions with? How do we improve that so we can then surface that to agents live when they're on the phone or in a chat? So I definitely think we're seeing the technology being used to improve itself, if you like, by using it as a training method and then really improving the responses it services to an agent who's talking live to a customer. So I know, Dave, you've got a different view of that, but I think we'll probably be aligned that definitely training is key, training the models, but then using it to train agents with stuff that's live and the key issues that they're hearing is going to be one of the big benefits of leveraging things like Gen AI.
Yeah, I mean, I wholly 100% agree.
Brilliant. There was another question, which I'm not going to go to in specifics around the data granularity. It said data granularity levels are likely to be key for success of Gen AI. Do insurers have enough readiness towards it? And I don't want to focus on insurers. I guess I would say, do you think, David, that great data granularity is important? And do you think anyone's got enough focus on it right now or readiness for it? We've talked about data readiness in general. How granular do you have to be? And do you think people are ready?
I think you've almost got to be down to the lowest kind of atom level, understanding your data, because otherwise you can't get the specific, detailed insights and learning. So the mapping exercise, your data mapping, your data modeling around your use cases and, the back end sourcing of that data all needs to be really well understood. And then the governance processes around how you're going to manage that data. So, data is the heart of this. If you don't have the right data and you don't have the right processes to manage your data, you're not going to get the benefits of AI. But yeah, it's the lowest possible level, really, because that's where the most insight will be drawn from. And it's high volume analysis of that data as well to draw out the best learnings.
Brilliant. So I'm going to bring this to a close now, unless there's any last questions. I'll give the audience a minute to get any last questions in. What I would say is, thank you for your time. I will ask you, David, just if you've got any last parting words, just give you time to think about those. But as I said, if you've got more interest in data around this area or more interest in understanding the Gen AI landscape, then please reach out to us at Everest Group. We do have a lot of research into this space. But David, any last wise parting words from a practitioner for the audience who may be thinking, right, how do we go from there, or how do we move forward from here? What do we need to be taking in to consideration as we look to go forward with these type of initiatives? Any wise parting words?
Yeah, I mean, these aren't new concepts and new ideas. I mean, these are pretty much the 101 steps that you would have for, most business related projects. I mean, you need to start off by being very, very clear on, why you're wanting to implement AI. So, what is the problem? What are the pain points? And being, clear on having well-defined use cases. So that's the first thing we've got to get right. So it's similar to any new system. Understand your business requirements. AI is no different. Understand the requirement, define it well. Again, understand your risks and develop mitigation plans. Be clear on the dimensions. You're going to need to look at things like regulation, skills availability within your organization, data availability, and then the impacts on both your customer and your employee experiences. So again, very important that you do that risk analysis. I think you need to spend some time modeling benefits. So don't be afraid to run multiple scenarios so you get a spectrum of potential return and factor in the investment costs to get you there, the technology, the people, the change effort, and also recognize that you're probably going to start to accrue some technical debt because you're doing things quite fast, to be nimble and, test how AI can add some benefits. I think you've got to look at your operating model. We're starting to talk to clients about how are they going to adapt their operating model, what processes are going to change, what new technologies are going to come in, what impacts that going to have on the resources and the colleagues that are executing some of the traditional processes. You've got to potentially think about new KPIs to measure the success, because again, most organizations spend a lot of time on getting the justification for funding, but they don't think about the measures that they can actually put in place to ensure that they've delivered something positive and a real return and ROI on that investment. And I think the final one is, don't be afraid to stop. If it looks like it's not working well, take the learnings and then iterate and try something different. I think that's the way AI is working, because we talked about the pace at the start, the opening, how quickly ChatGPT took off. It's the same with anything you're trying to deploy within your own organizations. You may have to learn and you may have to iterate many times before you get it kind of, fit for purpose for scaling.
Yeah, no, brilliant summary, David. Yeah, I guess just picking up on the ROI point, one of the big obstacles we have seen and heard from our clients is that the ROI is unclear, and therefore it's hard to get it over the line. It's not understood, and they're not able to articulate it. And then when we have spoken to organisations and started saying, in what time frame are you expecting an ROI? People are actually being fairly pragmatic and saying, well, it's a year or 18 months. It's not 3 months, because it's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to see these massive improvements happening overnight, or some will be, but then there's a cost to do them as well. So you have to factor in the cost. As you were saying, this stuff isn't free. There is, I think, a misnomer, as we said right at the beginning. Oh, well, ChatGPT, you can go online and sign up, and that means that we're going to use it for everything. That's not the way it works from an enterprise rollout perspective, and therefore there is a cost to this. And being pragmatic and reasonable with your ROI is going to mean you have more success moving forward as well, than thinking that you're going to suddenly have an ROI in 3 months.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time. It's been great to have this chat with you. I'm seeing people coming in on the chat late as well. So because this is streamed, there's people coming in and just joining. So again, unfortunately, won't be able to answer all the questions, but hopefully this has been useful. So watch this space. We've got a lot of research coming out around generative AI, the use cases, the production of how many have moved into production from pilot. That's going to be really interesting, I think, to see what use cases are actually making it production, which ones are failing at pilot phase. So yeah, please watch this space. But thank you again, David. It's been really great to get a practitioner's perspective, a consultant's perspective on what you're seeing, and hopefully our perspective from a research perspective combines pretty well and feels like we're aligned. But thank you for your time. Thank you for those who've listened. We'll give you 15 minutes back if you were planning to stay for an hour. Apologies, I've used 15 minutes of your time if you were here for 30 minutes. But thank you. Hopefully you found it useful. And we look forward to connecting next time.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, David, for hosting.
No worries. Thank you very much.